In July 2024, our crew made an interesting discovery in Lambert's cave in St. Paul, documenting the great turning point in mushroom cultivation. But before I describe that, I'd like to give just a little background for context on the mushroom industry around here. So if you look at this map, you can see Minnesota and Minneapolis-St. Paul area there. There's a black dot there, and you'll notice that there are these black dots or black circles of varying sizes around the country. The size of that circle indicates the size of the mushroom industry. So the largest one is at Pennsylvania. That is the capital of mushroom growing in the United States and pretty much always has been. But there are other pretty large ones in New York State. Then you see another one at Chicago. And then out west, you can see at San Francisco, Los Angeles, and I believe there's one up there in Seattle. So this was and for about a century, called the Mushroom Century, from about 1880 to 1980, locally, this was an important industry in the so-called Mushroom Valley, and that was a neighborhood along the Mississippi River, and near downtown, across the river from downtown St. Paul. And initially, these so-called caves were dug out as sand mines or silica mines, and that sand or silica was used, there were several purposes, for glass making. It's a very pure sand, so it made a great glass. It was incorporated into mortars, for concrete and so on. Also for making molds for the iron foundries around the city. So it had a lot of uses, but then what do you do with that sand mine when you're through excavating, when you're done with that area? And some of the immigrants moved in and set up, mushroom farms. And this photo here from 1923 shows the largest of all the St. Paul mushroom caves. And this is the Becker Sand and Mushroom Company cave on Water Street. And it was compared with a medieval cathedral. It was so large. And it still exists today, and although it's fairly inaccessible unless you know what you're doing, and this just shows what it looked like in 1923. Now, initially, when mushrooms were first cultivated, the Agaricus bisporus mushroom in particular, it was first cultivated, so far as is known, in the Parisian catacombs or quarries under Paris in the 1600s. And they were usually grown on the floor of these old mines, and this is called the floor bed system. And here we see an illustration from a USDA publication of a local example of that. In the early 20th century, things got a little bit more sophisticated. One of the downsides of the floor bed system, of course, is that you're only using the floor of the cave, whereas you're in this huge passage, typically 35 feet high in St. Paul. And you can use more of that three-dimensional volume if you build trays. And so this is where there was a big shift towards the tray system. And you can see it here, it looks kind of like library shelves. And that was a much more efficient. thing. Now, up to the present time, the remains of these trays have been the principal artifacts. Something has been a mushroom cave, in case you couldn't establish that from a city directory or whatever. Well, in the 1890s, there was an important development in mushroom cultivation, and this took place at the Pasteur Institute in Paris. And they developed a means whereby you could start from a single mushroom spore and grow the whole thing. Seems like a no-brainer. This is a really important point, though, because prior to this, if you were a mushroom farmer and you wanted to seed your beds, you had to use something called brick spawn. And this was sort of like you can imagine like a brick-shaped piece of turf from the old beds that you would then, cut out and save that. And then you could plant it to seed. In the next cycle of mushroom growing, you could seed the new beds. But it had some drawbacks, and most notably that there was a lot of other stuff in this brick spawn. There's a lot of what you might call weeds, parasites, and so on, which left it less than ideal. Well, that's where this fellow comes in, is a mycologist, Louis F. Lambert, and he was the local representative who kind of brought this idea of growing pure spawn and to our local industry. And there you see him on the left with a pile of the old brick spawn. And he established the American Spawn Company. And there are records of him operating in several of the St. Paul caves. And here you see an example of the pure spawn system. So instead of being in these like the old brick spawn, this is found in or established in milk bottles, repurposed milk bottles. And you can see here he has proudly shown the difference between his new patent spawn, as he calls it, and ordinary spawn. And it's a very striking difference. The new spawn on the left that he's marketing, it's all white. You notice those bottles are very whitish, and the ones on the right are dark. And it's white because it's really thoroughly infiltrated with those mycelial threads or hyphae. So it's a really active culture there. Whereas the one on the right, it's kind of darkish. It's like there's not much going on in those bottles. That's kind of what he's trying to say with this image. And you also notice in the label there, it says L.F. Lambert Mushroom Spawn, Coatesville, Pennsylvania. Now, he got his start. Lambert got his start in St. Paul. But he soon wanted to, join the big time. And so he moved out to the mushroom capital of the United States in Pennsylvania, and he moved his company there. And there's still, even today, there's the Lambert Spawn Company out there, which is a direct lineal successor of his original company that he founded, in the early 20th century. And he was, in addition to spawn, he was especially proud of the snow white mushroom. This is a variety of our common button mushroom that is, it's like the peak of flavor and texture and so on. Okay, so getting back to our area, there is a cave that is actually associated with him. Like I said, there are several that he worked in, but this one is actually named after him. It's called Lambert Cave, and it's along Water Street in St. Paul. And as you can see, It consists of basically two entrances connected by a long looping passage. And this map here this is one of the old fallout shelter maps that was made in the wake of the Cuban Missile Crisis in the early 1960s. They were just this actually, obviously long after Lambert's day, but that's when the map was drawn up. The local urban explorers call Lambert's Cave Candyman Cave for some reason. There's several different theories that I've speculated on, which I discuss in another video, which you should see. But this is, this is the how it's known locally. Here's a photo of it. This shows a scene from that long looping passage. It is a seasonally flooded loop. It's wet, and in summer it has about a foot depth of seepage in it, and then it dries out in winter and becomes more accessible. Well, one of the things that you see in this looping passage as you're going through it, along the wall, there is a line of driftwoods. I think this is wood that was kind of like floating in the lake, and it's left as a drift line against the wall. And a million people have passed this over the years, and as we did. But then we got to thinking, it looks like pieces of something, doesn't it? I mean, it's sort of like a handle's there. This looks like it was actually something at one time. So the talented Mr. Logagen set to work, and he tried to reconstruct something from these wooden artifacts. It was, the wood is worthless. It's just this punky wood that's just, it's soft and disintegrating. But what he noticed is that when you scrape them clean, it says on the sides of some of these pieces, the Minneapolis Bottling Company. Even though we're in St. Paul, they're using bottles that were, from Minneapolis. And this is when you reassemble these pieces, this is what you get. Okay, and it is, so it's a wooden box it's obviously not for carrying mushrooms. What we found is that it is for carting bottles around, milk bottles in particular, and we found remains of some of those in this pile also. So what this is doing, so to make a long story short, what this documents is that in the cave named after Lambert, here at last we have artifactual evidence of this great turning point in mushroom cultivation, and the deployment of the pure spawn system locally. Now, let's watch a little bit of Greg's footage of the discovery site, and we'll just see what we're talking about here.
So we have all these mushroom crates, or what's left of them. And we're speculating the water level might have been higher. This is just flotsam that kind of went to the side of the cave, but there's definitely just loads of these busted up crates. So I'm guessing they were either cultivated and harvested or in the crates. But So those look like nice handles, the little oval shapes. So yeah, we got lots of mushroom crates. I'll see if I can recompose one here, do a composite of pieces, maybe see what the actual crate looked like all the way whole. I might have enough pieces to make one crate. We'll see.